This is where we stopped last in talking about persuasion. I'm now going to move on to talk a little bit about organization. So a reminder, when we talked about topics, remember for persuasion you have to focus your topic in a specific way, whether it be question of fact, question of value, question of policy passive, or question of policy personal. The same thing is actually going to apply for organization, right? We're going to be talking about how you specifically have to structure your material for the speech. And keep in mind, the topics themselves, so whether it's question of fact, value, or policy, will dictate what organizational structure you have to use. So here are the organizational structures: statement of reasons, problem, cause, solution, and Monroes motivated sequence. So to talk a little bit about them, statement of reasons, problem, cause, solution, and Monroes motivated sequence, like I said, they are going to correspond to particular formats. So that's what I'm going to talk about and briefly go over how these formats actually work. So statement of reasons, this actually works with question of fact and question of value. So keep in mind, if your speech topic ends up falling into question of fact or value, you have to do statement of reasons. Now at this point you might be wondering, well, what is statement of reasons? Basically, this is a very, wordy definition. It's propositions or basically points that break down to support what you're talking about. So statement of reasons to some degree is kind of self-explanatory, right? You have statements that break down your reasoning. I'm going to show you an outline format so you can see basically what it looks like. So this is an example speech. This is what the outline looks like. You'll notice it says question of fact, because remember, if it's question of fact or value, it has to be statement of reasons. The topic here is about the collapse of the World Trade Center, arguing that it's an inside job. So again, conspiracy theories are very common for this particular topic of question of fact. The introduction is actually the exact same. Attention getter, thesis statement, value step, ethos, preview. None of that changes. What you're going to be focusing on for statement of reasons is providing reasons. So the first one they have is about structural information. They use research. Notice they're quoting their sources here, by the way. And then the next one is using the particular material that was a melting agent. And then they bring up another reason about the actual material and the speed with which it fell. So these are all different things that they're utilizing. And then the conclusion. So if you're thinking, hey, this looks a lot like the informative speech, it does. It's very, very similar. All you're really doing here is taking a persuasive focus. So statement of reasons is really not that much different. It's a breakdown of points, and then you need to prove the points themselves. The next one we'll talk about is problem, cause, solution. So problem, cause, solution is going to be with question of policy passive. So if you do a passive speech, it has to be problem, cause, solution. What it basically is going to break down is into three things. First, discuss the reasons for the change by addressing the problem, hence problem of the first part. Then you may explain the reasons behind the problems. This is optional. So this is the cause, right? Why is it happening? And then give the solution. So discuss what the proper solution is, and you also need to prove the effectiveness. So it's important that not only you clearly explain what it is you want to do to solve the issue, but prove that it can in fact actually solve the issue. Again, remember that the second part, the cause, that is optional. You don't have to do that. And then the last one we'll talk about is Monroes motivated sequence. Monroes motivated sequence goes to question of policy personal. So if you're doing a personal action speech, you have to use Monroes. This is actually going to break down into 5 steps. It's one of the more complicated versions of organizational formats, but it's actually one of the most effective. Monroes is used professionally. You'll see that in lots of examples, and you're going to watch one for homework actually. So the 5 steps, you're going to use a narrative in the beginning. You're later going to explain the problem that needs to be addressed, similar to the problem step and problem, cause, solution. Then provide the solution that the audience can complete, because remember, this is personal, so it's personal action. The audience has to do something. Then you use a narrative to get the audience to see what the solution would look like, and then you give specific information on how to complete the solution. Now, if you're thinking, what? I don't get this. I'm going to go over in a little bit more detail in a second, so just hold on. What I want to do now, though, is go back to problem, cause, solution, and then I'll come back to Monroes. Statement of reasons is relatively easy to understand, so for the rest of this video, I'm just going to cover problem, cause, solution, and Monroes. So remember, the first thing you're going to start out with is the problem. Now, you might be asking, well, how does this work in an outline? The problem is going to be the first point in the body of the speech. So the introduction is not going to change here. You're still going to have the attention getter, the thesis, the value step, the preview. All that stuff doesn't change. The problem is going to be your first point. So you prove that it's an issue. Give information to prove that. The cause, like I said, is optional, but discuss why it's happening, what's going on. And then the solution is clearly define it and prove its effectiveness. So let me give you an example. Right, if you have healthcare as your topic, which really is a subject because that's still very broad, but let's say you want to talk about universalizing healthcare. The problem that you would address is we have serious diseases that go undiagnosed and untreated, right, because people can't afford to go to the doctor, they don't want to because of costs, they're not going to begin with, so then they aren't actually getting treated for these diseases that they may not even know they have. The cost. So the high cost of medical insurance and care is one of the major issues. Now, of course, I'm very briefly explaining these. You would need to go in depth with your research and analysis, and I'll show you how that looks in an outline in a second. And then the solution. So what is it that you want to do? Create a national healthcare system for all, and of course, you'd have to actually prove that this does, in fact, work. So here's an example of the speech that I just mentioned about nationalizing healthcare. Again, the introduction stays the same. All the parts are there. This says relevancy. This means value step, so don't worry about that. So the first point, again, is the problem. So affordability is essentially what's being addressed. There's then facts to prove that. This one talks about cost, which again basically is affordability. The second point is cause. Remember, this is optional. So some students do just problem solution if the cause is not really relevant to persuading their audience. If it doesn't help, you don't put it in. If it does, of course, do put it. So here they're talking about capitalism and healthcare not mixing, right? And that's majorly what's addressed through the evidence that they're utilizing. In another video, I'll be going more in depth on how to create outlines, which is why I'm very quickly going over this. Then the last point is the solution. So again, this is proving what it is and that it works. So they're first starting by talking about the effectiveness. It's worked in other countries. They also talk about Massachusetts. So that's essentially what they're addressing here. And then, of course, the conclusion. So that's how problem, cause, solution works. I'm going to now move on to talk about Monroe's motivated sequence. So remember, it breaks down into 5 steps. I'm going to go through what those steps are. The first is the attention step. Then the need, then satisfaction, visualization, and action. These are the 5 steps. So first, in attention, you're going to use a narrative or scenario that's going to show that there is a problem. Then you're going to establish that there is a problem. So again, this is similar to the problem step and problem, cause, solution. Satisfaction, you'll discuss what the audience has to do and the benefits. You want to address both of those things. And this, again, is similar to the solution step in problem, cause, solution. Visualization, you're going back to that narrative that you originally had and you're going to fix it. So you're going to show the audience what it would look like if they actually took a part in the behavior that you're asking them to change. And then action is going to be specific information on how to fix the problem. So to give you first, attention. So in the introduction, I'm going to use the scenario of a heart attack. So let's say, for instance, you're at your friend's house. The father of your friend has a heart attack. No one knows what to do. Someone calls 911 and then he's rushed to the hospital and he's in critical care. Then the need. Well, we have a problem with heart disease and heart failure in America. And so I'm obviously putting information here. So I'm proving that there's an issue. Now the scenario of the heart attack, right, is first going to get the attention of my audience. The need is then going to specifically address what is the problem that I'm going to be looking at. Once I've addressed the problem, I then want to tell the audience, well, what is it that they should do? I want people to get trained in CPR, right, to save lives. So again, you tell them what they should do and the benefits of it. Then visualization. So remember, this is when you go back to the attention step and fix it. So you now have been trained in CPR. The same thing happens, right? The father has the heart attack, but you're able to utilize CPR and help him so that he's not in such critical care when the ambulance does come. And then the last thing, action. This is where you're giving specific information to the audience so that they know exactly how they can do this. So you would give the audience things like, where they can get trained, how they can sign up for classes. So this is specifically giving them the information they need to complete the action, hence the name of the step. Sometimes students will ask me, well, what's the difference between satisfaction and action? The difference is satisfaction is just addressing what they need to do and why, which are the benefits. Action is the how, right? How is it that you're actually going to complete it? So this is what the outline is going to look like. This topic is on persuading the audience that everyone should learn self-defense. Now, the thing that I haven't yet said is how these steps break into the outline. There's 5 steps, so you might be wondering, where do they all go? The first step of attention is actually right here. So remember, it's a narrative or scenario or something basically to kind of illustrate the problem. So here they have that they just got off from work at Starbucks. It's really late, they're walking to their car, they can't find their keys, they're talking on their cell phone at the same time, and then out of nowhere someone grabs you and throws you down and takes all of your money. So of course this is supposed to illustrate that there's a problem with people not learning, how to protect themselves. So the first step is need. So keep in mind, even though there's 5 steps, there's only 3 of them in the body. The first step starts in the introduction. So the need, again, like I said, is parallel to the problem and problem cause solution. So they cover information as far as investigations on crimes, right, nationally how crimes are, and also this student takes the time to talk about how men are also affected, right, to make sure that again we're considering our audience. Then we move on to satisfaction, right, so it's what can you do, learn self-defense, and then of course the actual benefits to self-defense. Then you move on to visualization. Now remember, visualization is going back to what happened in that narrative that occurred in the attention step and fixing it. So again, you have that same thing going on over here, and you see that you're getting off of work, you're walking, it's late. Right now, you're looking around, you're listening for any suspicious noises, and then this time someone comes up to you and you're actually able to, karate chop them and get away. Action. This is where you tell the audience how, right? So this outline is actually from a student who was at FAU, which is why it's talking about a class that's offered at FAU. And then it gives the other self-defense classes at YMCA, and the student actually says she's going to write this on the board. And you'll notice, by the way, that the action is the last part, so action to some degree functions actually as your conclusion. So the 3 things of the need, satisfaction, and visualization are in the body of your speech, attention is in the introduction, and action is actually the conclusion. So for homework, here's what you need to do. First off, you're not done yet. Sorry, guys. You do need to watch a TED Talk. This is Megan J's 30 is not the new 20. In case I didn't attach the link, you can just Google it. You'll be able to find it very easily. And it's actually a really good TED Talk. You are also the intended audience, so this one is especially important for you. As far as questions you need to answer, when do you use statement of reasons? What are the 2 things you must do in the solution step of problem cause solution? I also need you to list your topic. Now, it should have been approved by now. If you weren't in class, then you probably haven't gotten an approved topic, so come see me, or you might be tweaking your topic, so email me, come to me, just you need to get an approved topic ASAP. You also need to list the question it falls into, and then based on that question, it would dictate the organizational format you need to use. So to give you an example, If my topic is everyone should adopt, right, obviously it's question of policy personal. Because I'm using personal action, I would have to use Monroes. So that's what I need you to list. Then I need you to bring in 2 sources for your speech topic that pass the CRAP test. So I'm going to be looking for things like Google Scholar, Google Books, the database, journalistic sources, right, using news or in-depth articles, any of those sorts of things. And then the reason I'm asking you to watch the TED Talk is because I want you to understand how these steps work when a professional does them. So I need you to list, in the attention step, Megan J does da-da-da-da-da, right? So the attention step, of course, is a narrative. So talk about what story does she use to point out the problem, and what is the problem, too, that she's pointing out, which she, of course, would detail a little bit more in the need step, and the action step, which, by the way, of course, there's 2 other steps that I'm skipping here, but just know you need to cover all 5 of the steps. Tell me what she's doing. How is she following Monroes? And that is it.